Documentary is presented for educational and informational purposes only. It examines a real criminal case using verified public reporting and public records. No graphic images or descriptions are shown or intended. Dark Crime File does not condone or glorify violence in any form. Viewer discretion is advised. On the morning of December 29, 2025, the Bay Park neighborhood of San Diego, California, was quiet. There was no storm, no power outage, no warning that anything was wrong. Just after sunrise, neighbors began their routines, some preparing for work, others walking dogs, a few stepping outside to check the weather. Within minutes, that calm would be replaced by the sound of emergency sirens, flashing lights, and disbelief. Authorities would later confirm that a woman had died inside her own home following a domestic incident involving a vehicle and a fire. The woman was 61-year-old Monica Coates. The man accused was her husband, 62-year-old Stephen Coates. What makes this case especially significant is not only how it ended, but how many documented warning signs appeared beforehand. This is not a story of randomness. This is a story of escalation. Bay Park is a residential area located just north of Mission Bay in San Diego. It is known for quiet streets, long-term residents, modest single-family homes, low levels of violent crime. Many residents describe Bay Park as the kind of place where neighbors wave, children ride bicycles, and serious crime feels distant. Police data reflects that perception. Serious violent incidents in Bay Park are relatively rare compared to other parts of the city. That context matters, because crimes like this often happen in places where danger feels unlikely and where warning signs are easy to dismiss. The home where this incident occurred sat along a typical residential street. Nothing about it stood out. And that is often how domestic violence hides. Monica Coates was 61 years old at the time of her death. Those who knew her described her as quiet but thoughtful, private, organized, focused on stability. She was not known to seek conflict or attention. Friends said Monica valued peace and routine. She preferred predictability over chaos. These personality traits are important to understand, because they often shape how victims respond to escalating danger. Monica did not broadcast her struggles. She handled concerns quietly. And when things became frightening, she took steps she believed would keep her safe. But those steps would not be enough. According to those close to her, Monica was careful. She planned ahead. She avoided unnecessary confrontation. This often meant she tried to resolve problems privately, rather than involving others. Experts say this is common among victims of domestic stress. They hope situations can be stabilized without outside intervention. But in some cases, that hope delays urgent action. Stephen Coates, 62, had been married to Monica. In the months leading up to December 2025, his behavior had changed noticeably. According to court filings and police reports, Stephen began showing signs of increasing emotional instability. These included heightened suspicion of others, repeated accusations without evidence, growing distrust toward people around him. Friends and acquaintances noticed that his thinking appeared increasingly rigid and paranoid. Mental health professionals had reportedly interacted with Stephen prior to the incident. This is an important point, because this case was not about a sudden emotional break. It was about a pattern. Experts explain that when emotional instability combines with relationship conflict, risk increases significantly, especially when one partner attempts to create distance. Legal action is taken. Control is perceived as slipping away. Stephen's behavior, according to records, aligned with several known escalation markers. But escalation does not always look dramatic at first. Often, it appears subtle. In November 2025, approximately 1 month before her death, Monica took a significant step. She filed for a temporary restraining order against her husband. In the filing, Monica expressed fear for her safety. She cited concerns about Stephen's behavior and state of mind. Restraining orders are legal tools designed to create space and protection. But experts caution that they are not physical barriers. In fact, The period immediately after filing is considered one of the most dangerous times for victims. According to court documents, Monica described escalating tension, emotional unpredictability, statements that caused her fear. This was not a casual decision. Filing a restraining order requires acknowledging danger. Monica did what many advocates recommend. She sought help through the legal system. While restraining orders are critical tools, they rely on compliance. They do not provide constant monitoring, guarantee immediate enforcement, eliminate emotional volatility. This gap between legal intention and real-world protection is a recurring theme in domestic violence cases. The morning of December 29, 2025, began like any other. There were no reports of storms, no emergency alerts, no visible police activity. At approximately 7:38 a.m., San Diego emergency dispatchers began receiving calls. One of those calls came from Monica Coates herself. She reported that her husband had driven a vehicle into their residence. Multiple callers soon followed. First responders were immediately dispatched. Within minutes, police units were en route. Fire crews were dispatched. Medical personnel were alerted. What responders found would shift the situation from a domestic call to a major investigation. When emergency crews arrived, they encountered structural damage to the home. A pickup truck embedded into the building. Active fire conditions requiring immediate action. Firefighters worked to control the situation and secure the structure. Monica was located inside the home and transported for medical treatment. Despite efforts, authorities later confirmed that she did not survive. Stephen Coates was also transported to a medical facility. At this stage, investigators began asking critical questions. Initial assessments raised concerns. Vehicle positioning, impact angle, fire behavior. These elements suggested intent rather than accident. The case quickly shifted focus. Crash reconstruction specialists examined the scene. Their findings indicated the vehicle had been directed toward the structure. There was no evidence of last-minute braking. Fire investigators evaluated ignition patterns. Indicators suggested the fire was not accidental. At this point, law enforcement formally classified the incident as a homicide investigation. By the end of December 29, 2025, a woman was dead. A husband was hospitalized. A quiet neighborhood was shaken. By the afternoon of December 29, 2025, the scene on the Bay Park Street had changed. Emergency vehicles were gone. Fire crews had completed their work. Yellow police tape surrounded the property. What remained was a secured crime scene and a growing list of questions. Investigators from multiple departments were now involved. San Diego Police Department detectives, arson investigators, crash reconstruction specialists. This was no longer a response. It was an investigation. Early analysis focused on three key elements: vehicle trajectory, fire origin, timeline consistency. Each element was examined independently, then compared. According to preliminary findings, the vehicle had been deliberately aligned toward the residence. The impact path was direct, not consistent with loss of control. Fire indicators suggested intentional ignition rather than accidental spread. Together, these findings raised serious concerns. Domestic incidents are often complex. Investigators must determine intent, state of mind, sequence of events. In this case, the presence of a prior restraining order immediately elevated the seriousness. Prosecutors later emphasized that this was not an isolated event, but the culmination of documented escalation. Court filings from November 2025 became central to the case. They showed Monica's expressed fear, her attempt to create distance, her belief that the situation could become unsafe. These records provided crucial context. They demonstrated foresight and concern. One of the most sensitive aspects of this case involved mental health. According to public records, Stephen Coates had prior interactions with mental health professionals. This raised a critical question. How does mental health intersect with criminal responsibility? Under California law, Mental health challenges do not automatically remove responsibility. The key question is whether a person understood their actions and consequences. Investigators examined prior diagnoses, behavioral patterns, statements made before and after the incident. No conclusions were rushed. Experts emphasized that mental health support is crucial, but it must be paired with risk assessment. Warning signs often include paranoia, fixation on perceived threats, escalating control behaviors. This case demonstrated how untreated or insufficiently managed issues can intersect with domestic conflict. Once Stephen Coates was medically cleared, law enforcement moved forward. He was taken into custody and formally charged. The charges included murder, arson, domestic violence-related enhancements. Prosecutors stated that the severity of the charges reflected both the outcome and the alleged intent. In public remarks, authorities emphasized the intentional nature of the act, the prior warning signs, the importance of accountability. They also noted that this case would proceed through the court system like any other serious felony case. News of the incident spread quickly. Local outlets reported the timeline, the restraining order, the charges. National outlets followed. Public reaction ranged from shock to sorrow. Many asked, how could this happen after legal steps were taken? Most coverage emphasized domestic violence awareness, the importance of early intervention, resources for those at risk. This approach reflected a shift in how such cases are discussed publicly. In the days following Monica's death, the Bay Park community gathered quietly. Flowers appeared near the home. Candles were placed along the sidewalk. Neighbors described disbelief, sadness, concern for unseen struggles in their own communities. The tragedy sparked difficult conversations. Experts note that this case follows patterns seen across the country. Common elements include escalation after separation, legal action triggering increased risk, private suffering before public tragedy. Understanding these patterns is critical for prevention. Following the arrest of Stephen Coates, the case entered the formal judicial phase. This stage is often the longest and least visible part of any criminal case. Court proceedings move slowly. Evidence is reviewed repeatedly. Motions are filed. Legal arguments are refined. Prosecutors began assembling their case around three central pillars. Prior documentation of risk, physical and forensic evidence. Defense attorneys, meanwhile, prepared to examine mental health history, state of mind, legal responsibility. This process is not about speed. It is about precision. To secure a conviction, prosecutors must demonstrate that the act was intentional, that the accused understood the nature of the act, that the act directly resulted in loss of life. Prior court filings, including the restraining order, play a significant role in establishing context. They help show that the event did not occur in isolation. Domestic violence cases involving complex factors often require expert testimony, mental health evaluations, detailed forensic analysis. The legal system moves deliberately because the consequences are severe. Experts who study domestic violence emphasize one critical point. Escalation is rarely sudden. It develops over time. Common escalation markers include increasing control, heightened suspicion, emotional volatility, fear expressed by the victim. Monica's actions, including seeking legal protection, align with known escalation timelines. Research consistently shows that the period surrounding separation is one of the most dangerous. Because separation represents loss of control. When control is perceived as threatened, risk increases. This does not mean victims should stay. It means additional support is essential. Many victims experience the most danger when there is no visible conflict. Outward calm can mask inward instability. This is why community awareness matters. This case also highlights systemic challenges. Restraining orders are valuable tools, but they are reactive, not proactive. They rely on compliance, enforcement, availability of resources. They do not provide continuous monitoring, physical protection, guaranteed prevention. Experts argue for layered safety approaches. Enhanced follow-up after restraining orders. Coordinated mental health and law enforcement response. Increased funding for intervention programs. Community-based reporting systems. No single measure is sufficient alone. Prevention requires coordination. Some may ask, why tell these stories at all? The answer is awareness. Cases like this are not anomalies. They are part of a larger pattern. By examining real cases responsibly, we identify warning signs, reduce stigma, encourage earlier intervention. Silence does not protect people. Information does. This documentary avoids sensationalism for a reason. Violence should never be entertainment. It should be examined thoughtfully, with the goal of understanding and prevention. At the center of this case is a woman who sought safety. Monica Coates was not defined by how her life ended. She was a person who valued peace, took steps to protect herself, trusted the systems meant to help her. Her story deserves respect. Remembering victims means learning from what happened, not looking away. Communities play a critical role in prevention. This includes taking concerns seriously, checking in on those who seem isolated, supporting local resources, avoiding assumptions that everything is fine. Violence often hides behind normal appearances. Experts recommend trust your instincts, offer support without judgment, share resources discreetly, encourage professional help. Intervention does not always mean confrontation. Sometimes it means presence. This case was not random. It was not sudden. And it was not without warning. It unfolded step by step, quietly, privately, until the consequences became irreversible. Domestic violence is not always loud. It is not always visible. And it is not always understood in time. Which is why stories like this matter. We end with a question, not for shock, but for reflection. When warning signs appear, and someone you trust begins to change, what systems should be in place to truly protect those at risk? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. If this documentary raised concerns for you or someone you know, professional support is available. Thank you for watching Dark Crime File. Subscribe for educational, responsible true crime documentaries focused on awareness, accountability, and prevention.